Huge.
Yes, if you put that on for recording purposes, because we're recording everything. Eventually turn it on mute or now it's up on YouTube. Alright,
Show stuff to
they might
You're going to Texas.
I knew.
So you know okay. So it's really interesting, now that it's done. Veteran stuff, so right on Wisconsin. So we have 1,000 square feet. Have to make the library. Yeah, we are
see you or to see how it goes. Then I will try and make them good.
Baby that worked. It was very
So I think we should get started. I'm MIchele Pistone, and I am delighted to be here. This is my first Cali conference, and I even got a special hat as a presenter, so it's very cool. And I've been to a lot of LegalED conferences and never walked away with anything as cool as this. So I'm really glad to be here because what I'm working on, like I really want to bring this community in particular into the fold in this project that I've been working on for the last few years. And so I'm a professor at Villanova, and last semester I visited at American with Billy Joe Kaufman. And I teach a clinic in which my students and I represent asylum seekers. And so a few years ago, there was a LegalED conference in Seattle. And it brought together clinicians and the curriculum section. And it was the first day of the clinical conference was this joint conference between the curriculum section and the clinical legal education section. And one of the goals of that conference was to kind of share innovations in teaching. And one of the things that I found, which was really interesting, so we had this one breakout where clinicians were working with doctrinal faculty, thinking about how to teach more actively in the classroom. And it was a really, really lively session. And the people who were there from the curriculum committee really benefited a lot from hearing about clinical instruction, because a lot of what we do in clinical education is very active, very hands-on, as you can imagine. So that's actually what got me thinking and got me kind of focused on this project that I'm working on. So LegalED is a web-based platform that we hope to build into a community of law teachers and law students so that we can use the web to collaborate and share both our teaching materials and also videos and other materials that can create more of an active learning in the law school classroom. So I feel really strongly that online technologies have a really big role to play in the future of legal education. And I think that they can actually address some of the shortcomings that we've been hearing recently and even dating back 100 years about how we don't teach enough practical skills and values in the classroom. And one of the reasons that I think that LegalED can help is that what we're trying to do, so LegalED is a project that's basically a collection of law professors from around the country. Hopefully some of you will join our effort. And it's basically to create a platform for online teaching materials, both directed at students and then a section on professional development. So a section of materials directed at law professors. And I'll get into a little bit of that later. And I think that online technologies can be used in every law school classroom to bring more active learning into the classroom. So LegalED is not about distance learning in the traditional sense, where professors and students are separated either by time or by place, and it's not about MOOCs. What it's about is blending the classroom, so using blended learning, so a combination of online technologies and in-class instruction. And so the vision is to migrate to the web whatever content can effectively be taught online through videos, online assessments, quizzes, other types of materials. So my vision is if we can migrate to the web, stuff that's otherwise taught in a passive way, kind of like what we're doing here right now. If we can migrate that to the web, then we can change the way the classroom dynamic is. And we can make the classroom much more active. So students can learn what they need to learn outside of class and then come into class ready to work on activities based on that. So, LegalED is this website, and the URL is legaledweb.com. And we've already started to collect some videos. Aaron Dewald, who you'll hear, I think you're presenting tomorrow?
I am, 1 o'clock. This room, be there. Be here.
So Aaron and his colleagues at University of Utah have created a whole series of videos. They have like 36 videos on contracts. Those videos are up online. They also have a series of videos on cyber law and others that are up online at this website. And so basically it's supplementing what students would learn in the classroom. So I've created some videos that are on the website that explain what flipping the classroom is all about. And so as I said, like if this were a traditional classroom, I would have asked you to watch this video outside of class and then come into class ready to do some activities on it. Since I didn't have that opportunity, I thought we'd spend 3 minutes watching the video now.
Law professors hear a lot about how law schools need to adapt what and how they teach to the changes taking place in the legal profession. Employers and alumni, and even journalists, all tell us that law schools need to do more to help students integrate the legal doctrine that has traditionally been the focus of legal education, with instruction in practical lawyering skills and the values and ethics of the profession. They further suggest that integration can occur if law schools teach students how the doctrine they are learning is actually used by lawyers in practice. And we also have heard about the innovative and effective ways to teach legal doctrine to today's digitally native students. The problem law professors face is how to fit in their instruction all the relevant substantive law and training of practical skills and professional values without raising costs. Flipping the law school classroom may be the answer. Flipped learning blends online instruction with face-to-face instruction. It uses the internet for what it does well, information and knowledge delivery. When relevant information, say a video that supplements and explains assigned readings, is delivered by online videos, then face-to-face class time can be devoted to learning activities that not only reinforce the knowledge, but also ask students to use their new learning actively to analyze, evaluate, apply, or create material, all of which reinforces learning. Blending online and in-class instruction is supported by research. A Department of Education meta-analysis judged blending learning as more effective than only online classes or only in-class teaching. Here is how flipped or blended learning works. Students watch short online videos on substantive areas of law, practical lawyering skills, and even practice tips as homework. Law students can watch the videos at their own pace, at any time, from anywhere, as many times as needed for mastery. They can pause, rewind, go back. This gives students more autonomy and control over their own learning. It also prepares them to come to class ready to engage in deeper learning, learning that requires students to apply, analyze, evaluate, or create something based on the assigned readings and videos that they watched as homework. And when students watch videos as homework, face-to-face class time is freed up for these active ways of learning and teaching. Want to try blended learning? LegalED can help. Watch, learn, join LegalED today.
So as you can imagine, if one of the goals is to start moving doctrinal faculty and clinical faculty, anyone within the academy, to more blended learning, I think one of the biggest challenges is to try to retool faculty so that they're understand how to use the technology, familiar with the technology, and understand the value of flipping the classroom and doing more active problem-based learning. Because it's not only about bringing more skills and values into the classroom, but learning sciences also support this. So learning sciences say that students learn best when they're actively engaged in their learning. So even if they're learning something that's not a skill or a value, they still need to do it in a more active way. So the second part, or the second goal of LegalED then, is to try to figure out what resources can be made available to colleagues so that they can begin to start testing and using these kind of online technologies. So part of that is to create, so one thing that LegalED is doing is creating a collection of materials that are directed at law professors. So we have the videos that are directed at law students that deal with substantive areas of law, but we also have a part of the website that's directed at law professors. And there we're going to have a series of videos on teaching pedagogy. And we've started developing that series at a conference that we hosted in April at American University, Washington College of Law. So Billy Joe Kaufman and I worked together to organize a conference which we styled as a TEDx conference. So I don't know if anyone in the room is familiar with TED, but you can imagine it's a very different format than most law professors are used to presenting in that style. So the conference was on April 4th, and Brian Rapp Billy Joe and their team is in the process of putting together the videos now. One of the videos from that conference, I have a little clip that I can show you. It's Jill Smith from Georgetown. And she's going to be talking much more in depth about the concepts that she introduced here. But as you'll see when you see Jill, the conference was different than a typical talking head panel of speakers. So we prepared the speakers a lot. They had to commit to a pretty intense schedule of preparation. And we told all the speakers that they could only speak for 8 to 10 minutes, and that each PowerPoint slide could only have 5 words or less. So they had, you can imagine that's hard alone for law professors to have 5 words or less.
Following directions.
So we had a series of intense conference calls where we prepped people and we made pods so that people could prep each other and work with each other, people that were working on the same topic areas. And it was outstanding. I mean, we were blown away with the quality of the talks and the quality of the preparation. We had a rehearsal the night before, late at night. American has conferences 9 to 5, like 7 days a week. So the only time we could even get together to prep was the night before at like, what, 5? 5 or 6. So it was the first time we could get a room to start prepping. And so everyone got up to do like 2 or 3 minutes of their talk just to kind of, feel what it was like in the space. And we were blown away with the quality. And you'll see Jill's is one of the first that we were able to produce. I just have to bring it up here.
Thanks
She
for
always
that
looks
still.
like
Thanks for that.
Okay, so we're still refining.
She needs a hat too.
Move on, wide open.
Alright.
Now it's
It's
wide
wonderful.
open.
So, and these videos will be on
Video is
the
become-
American University, Washington College of Law website and also on LegalED.
A fairly
Once
big
they're
thing. I think in
finalized.
other venues I might have to. And we've all seen videos that were great, like MIchele Pistone's on the LegalED web, and we've all seen ones that are really painful, right? Nobody in this room does painful ones. I know this is for everybody out there. So that pained reaction that your students get, or that other people's students get, that actually distracts them from the learning process, I believe. And so what I want to talk to you today is about how to sort of get out of the way, make great screen capture, and create a product that actually enhances the learning rather than distracts from it. In doing that, I'm going to use the Hollywood production process as a metaphor, and then at the end I'm going to give you a concrete tool so you can get started if you have never done one of these before, or if you'd like to try this particular tool because you've created videos in the past. So first, I'm going to introduce you to your star. Your star is the visual information that you want to convey, right? Because otherwise you do an audio.
So that's an example of one of the talks that we had at the conference. And as you can see, Jill was standing without a podium, without notes. She had memorized the whole thing, and it was excellent. And I didn't want to give away too much because she's doing her talk here. She's expanded what she gave in 8 minutes to an hour, and you'll be able to learn a lot about how to put together the slides. And what we're going to do, as I said, this video is in production, so we're going to change it so that you're not looking at the video on the screen, but it's on the whole, it's kind of embedded into the video. But the goal, as you can imagine, is to try to create a series of educational videos about law teaching that is available to law professors to use whenever, right? So that they don't have to be at this conference to hear me talk today about this topic. They can go online and watch it at any time, from any place, at their convenience. And so one of the things that I'd love to work on with people in this community is figuring out how we can do more of these style conferences at your law school. And that's one of the things I'd like to talk to you guys about at the end. But so LegalED is going to have this collection of videos, and we're already planning our next conference, Igniting Law Teaching Conference at American for next spring. where we're going to replicate what we did this year. So at this conference, we had about 35 speakers. And they were all 8 to 10 minutes, really quick. We webcast it live that day, and then we're going to have the videos up. The second part of this collection is going to be a collection of teaching materials that professors have created for their own teaching, but that people are willing to share with the community, so that somebody else can either adapt it whole cloth or can amend it for their own environment, for their own teaching, for their own courses. So one of the first collections that we have in that series is Jean Poe-Peters is a professor at Yale, and she, together with Sue Bryant from CUNY, have been working on how to teach cultural competency. They wrote an article about it, and in, I guess, around 2000. And since then, they've been building a lot of materials, and there are a lot of people who use their materials. So they've given us, just a few weeks ago, all of their teaching materials. We're going to put it online, and then Jean Poe-Peters is in the process of creating a series of videos that explain the pedagogy, so that law professors can look at the videos, they can read the article, they can also then have the materials that Jean and Sue have created. So that if you are going to start teaching this, you might not want to adopt exactly what Jean uses, but at least it's a starting point. This came to me because a few years ago, I was trying to create a rubric for a client interview. And I thought, there's got to be a rubric online. And so I started Googling it. And I couldn't find a rubric that had been used in law school for interviewing. So I'd seen some initial rubrics about interviewing that I ended up adopting, but they weren't from a legal context. So that got me thinking, why don't we create an online repository of these materials, so that once I create my rubric and I've put hours into working on it and refining it, it's now limited to me using it in my classroom with my group of students. So LegalED now, through LegalED, we can post those things online, and people can either, as I said, adopt it whole cloth or adapt it to their own teaching. So that's the second part of the collection. And just to let you know, the articles that came out of the journal of the Igniting Law Teaching Conference are going to be in a journal, the next journal of legal education. So I think about 10 of the speakers have been invited to write articles for that journal. So as you can see, LegalED is bringing technology into legal education in these two ways, right? By creating the videos that will be available to students, and by creating a repository of materials for professors. And one of the reasons that I care so strongly about this, and I've been working on it for the last few years, is that I think that it's really important for legal education to start using online technologies. And I think there's at least 4 reasons why we need to start doing it. Let me get back to my keynote. So as I said, we need to incorporate more competencies-based lawyering into our teaching. So without shortchanging the traditional focus on doctrinal training, we need to also, we can use online tools to start enabling teaching of more of the lawyering competencies that Schultz and Zedek and others have found is so central to effective lawyering. And one of the reasons that this is so important is because of the collapse of the traditional entry-level associate model. So in the past, we in the academy could rely on law firms to train our students in the practice of law. And in fact, that was, if you go back to the Cravath model, that was actually the preferred goal, right? To have students learn the doctrine in law school, and then for Cravath to mold the student once they came there to become a Cravath lawyer. But times have changed, and what we're finding now is that students need to have these competencies to get in the door, right? They need to be skilled in practice and values before they enter the market. And this isn't just a cyclical development. I see this as a change in the practice of law. And so I think it's something that the Academy needs to address and bring more training in that into the classroom. So, so that's the first reason that I think it's important. The second reason is that we need to start developing expertise in these technologies in the Legal Academy. As you guys definitely know, there's been a tremendous spike in investment in ed tech in K through 12. And MOOCs are on the rise in higher education. We see Udacity and edX and Coursera. There's something happening here, and we need to know what it is. Yet, few in the Legal Academy are looking into it and figuring out how we can reconceptualize how we teach in order to adapt to the changing world. So if we embrace online technologies now, we'll begin to develop that expertise within the Academy about how to best use technologies for our own teaching. And that's important because it puts us in a position to learn and take advantage of what we've learned from learning sciences about the value of assessment, formative assessment. There's also technologies, online materials can provide assessment. So there's Newton and other companies that are developing technologies in order to assess students. And one of the values of this kind of assessment is that you can track individual students and figure out what they're doing right and what they're doing wrong, so that we can create an environment where all students can master the material before they graduate. Right now we have a system where we give final exams as assessment, but students don't know how they're doing until the end of the semester. And at that point it's too late to go back and learn the material. In fact, many students don't even know what they did right or wrong on an exam, right? They really never go to a faculty member after the exam, after they've gotten a grade, to look at it and figure out what they got right or wrong. Whereas if we can embed assessment into our teaching in a formative way using technology, students can learn what they are doing right and wrong all along the way. So by the time they get into a final exam, they'll all get A's. I mean, we'd have to deal with the curves and all that. But wouldn't that be a beautiful place to be? And in fact, that's where I am in clinical education. I represent clients. My students represent asylum seekers who fled persecution and are really afraid to go back to their home countries. If they go back to their home country, they fear that they're going to die. So my students work really hard. And regardless of where they are when they come in, they all graduate as A students. Why? Because they have to. They have to go to court and win asylum for this client. And so why not have that kind of a motivation and a system in doctrinal classes as well? And I think that's what our future can bring if we start embracing technology in legal education. So as a little aside, as I mentioned, was teaching at American this last semester. I have a 4th grader, and we decided that instead of putting her into a school system in DC only for a few months, we would homeschool her. And so we used Khan Academy for math. And Khan Academy has this embedded assessment program, which is amazing. And I was able to track exactly what she was doing, what kind of questions she was getting right, what kind of questions she was getting wrong. I knew if she was having problems with decimals, that's what I would ask her the next day to work harder on, because I could see when I monitored the website that she needed work on that. And by the end of 4 months, so we were there from January to May, she had mastered 4th grade math and had already gotten to 82% of 5th grade math. So the other value of this is that you get to work at your own pace. If she were in school, she wouldn't have gotten to 5th grade math. But she was ready to do it, And so that's another kind of added benefit of online learning, that it becomes more personalized, customized over time. The next big thing, right, that you guys all know about is big data, and how once we start creating these technologies, we'll then figure out how law students learn. So that it's not only about the individual student, but it's about the whole collection of students. And that's what Coursera is doing, and Khan Academy is doing, and Newton. They're using this big data to figure out how people learn. And there might be different ways that different people learn, but at least they get, because we have the data about every click they do, every mistake they make. So on Khan Academy, I can go to every question my daughter answered and find out whether she got it right or wrong and what her answer was. So people can figure out, like, okay, if everyone's making the same mistake, then maybe there's something that they need to master before they get to decimals so that they're not making that mistake. The other day, I was watching her while she's on Khan Academy, because she wants me physically there while she does her math. But a prompt came up to say, you just got this question right a few minutes ago. What do you think was the reason you got it wrong now? And what happened was she had miscalculated. Like she had done the calculation, but like there were two parts of it, and she put one part in, and it was supposed to be the other part of the calculation. So, but there again, it was asking her, was it just a mistake, or is there something more that you need? I mean, this is what computers can do to help us to understand how students are learning. You could tell how excited I am about it. The other thing is that it helps us to meet students where they are, which is digital. Right, so this is an amazing book. If you haven't already read it, it's actually a few years old now, but it talks about digital natives, right? So our students, more and more, are digital natives. We're digital immigrants, and so we're migrating to this culture, and I know I'm migrating at a slower pace than you guys because you're all very technologically savvy, but I was really surprised to learn that between 2000 and 2002, the largest group of first-time internet users were between 2 and 5 years old. So that places the oldest members of that group in college now and in law school soon. And their culture is different than ours. They're much more connected. They want instant access. They want instant feedback. I watch my daughter when she plays video games, and she doesn't care if she fails. She learns through her failures. So she just kind of tests it out, and if it doesn't work, she starts again, and she tests it out. And I remember hearing a digital native like me talk about that and say, my students don't care if they don't get it right the first time, and it frustrates them. And I think it's because we don't understand that this is a different culture, right? And that they're learning different, that they process information differently, and we need to start thinking about how to connect to that culture. So they value convenience, anytime, anywhere access. They want to watch things on their phones, right? And so giving them material that they can watch on their phones is I think, the way to go. And they have so much information at their fingertips. Like, I remember celebrating when my family got the World Book Encyclopedia in my living room. It was such a big deal, right? We didn't have to go to the library to answer a really simple question, like, what's the capital of Cameroon or something. Like, my daughter has that, right, all the time. Even coming up here yesterday, we saw Lexington conquered, and we pulled up my phone and we gave Julie a little history lesson on Lexington Concord because of the abundance of technology. So, and the other thing about my daughter and others in this digital immigrant generation is that when they need to answer a question, the first place they go to is YouTube. And there are millions of people going to YouTube every day to solve their questions. So why not have YouTube-type videos about the law that can help our law students solve their questions as well? And then the fourth reason is that we have to. And so you guys all know about Moore's Law. you all know about the fact that storage capacity is doubling every few years. And the memory, I was surprised to learn this, that the memory in an iPad 5 is 240,000 times the memory of the Voyager. And so we have so much more capacity that it's just inevitable that we're going to start using it for legal education. And it's really important for us to understand the significance of this, because it relates to an issue in labor economics. It's called the Baumol effect. So the Baumol effect is the traditional example of the Baumol effect is an orchestra, like a quartet. Regardless of how technology improves, you still need 4 people to play a specific symphony in a quartet, right? And so their productivity is not going to increase, even as technology increases. And for a really long time, people thought that education was subject to the Baumol effect. But what's happening now, what we're seeing through technology, is that it's not any longer subject to the Baumol effect. So we can become much more productive. Law professors can become much more productive, reaching many more people using that same hour, right? So that's a really interesting, significant development. And people like Clay Christensen from the Harvard Business School, who studies disruption, predicts that disruption is coming toward education. In fact, the Clay Christensen Institute focuses on education and health as the 2 next industries that are going to be disrupted through technology. So I think that we need to start using technology in order to preserve the best parts of legal education. Like, in order to preserve a place-based law school, we need to embrace technology, bring it into our culture, and use it in a way that effectively supplements what we can do actively in a classroom. So that's why I started LegalED, and I'd love to spend the rest of the time just kind of talking about it. One of the things that I'd love to talk about is some of the challenges that you guys see in trying to adopt this, and what resources you think people in your own institutions might need and benefit from in order to start moving us toward a future that involves more online teaching in legal education.
Thank you, Michele. I'm seeing John Mayer up there, and I suspect we're like preaching to the choir 24 years ago or whatever.
I don't sing.
But I think we still have, and I don't know how long this is going to last, you know, you still see the articles. I just went on whatever it's called, Big Law blog thing, and they shouldn't use laptops in the classroom, and they should, you know, like, get over it, folks. I mean, they are doing it. So how do we keep sending this drug and getting it into the right veins that people really get that it actually is good?
Right.
And I think that assessment piece might be one of the tickets to that, whether it's through academic support or whatever. But I think some people think it's just way too much work. I mean, it is a lot of work. But so maybe LegalED and Cali, those groups that do all of this, somehow we have to market. We have to still figure out how to market. But I know John must know these stats. Of the Cali lessons and the incredible new use of Cali because of flipped classrooms. I mean, you know, people say, well, I need something to give them the night before. And I say, well, what about a Cali lesson? So, John, what about the stats? Like, what do you think about it? This is not your program, but.
and I have had long conversations. I've learned a lot from this man.
So Michelle asked the essential question is like, how do you get faculty to do stuff? The answer is you don't. You cannot get faculty, you cannot force them, convince them, whatever, to do anything. They don't have any itches to scratch, as far as I can tell. They're pretty happy with the setup the way it is. To quote Rahm Emanuel, this crisis is an opportunity, and it's making people at all sorts of schools say, hey, maybe we should look at some other things. You better not start with the word technology. You better start with the problem, and technology is one of the enablers of that. That's how I've always tried to do that. But one of my board members said, you need to go read this book called The Diffusion of Innovation by Everett Rogers. He's the guy that invented that adopter curve, the early, late, middle adopters and things like that. And my takeaway from that is people only adopt stuff when somebody like them say, you should adopt this.
Right.
Or they see somebody else doing it.
Right.
So unfortunately, those people aren't in this room.
Right.
Right? They don't come to the Cali conference too often. And sometimes they'll come to brown bags and stuff like that, but they'll be in the back, arms crossed in the classic, I'm not buying this crap. Unless the presentation is by one of their respected colleagues. So I think it's a pointy wedge thing. You got to find the very few respected colleagues who will then amplify them until there's more of them, and then amplify them until we have a true tsunami of adoption.
Yeah, there's definitely a sort of an evangelist kind of person. You got to find that node. And the other thing I find is that, and Georgetown is great for this. So like they'll have occasional symposia, and they will invite various people to come in and talk to the faculty. And I had recently had a symposium, and it was on scholarship tools. And so I talked a lot about things like Zotero, and I went to help give some hands-on help to a faculty member a day or two later, and it was like gophers popping out of their holes. I had people coming out of their offices going, when you're done with her, can you help me?
Wow.
Because I had this one event, and I had a critical mass of people there, and sometimes that's hard to get. I've been in a position where you have an event and you even give them cookies. And but if you can manage to get sort of that critical mass, and then if you are in the office and they hear your voice, and they will start sort of saying, that thing you show, can you put that on my computer? Can you show me how to do that hands-on? And it can be a very granular hands-on process. But then that's when you start to gain traction from my experience.
So the Zotero scratch is an actual itch. People hate messing with their citations and managing them. Flipped classrooms don't scratch your typical faculty member's itch. My teaching's fine. I don't need to make any changes to it.
What I found is that for that sort of thing, it's on a small scale. It's you talk to a property professor and you say, what do your students routinely not get? Rule against perpetuity. Can we create for you a video with some assessment tools at the end that help them to review it? And it's not a full flipped classroom, but there's an element of it there. And if they see the value, they say, oh, okay, this is neat. This isn't them just rereading the same text that they didn't understand the first time and the third time and the 50th time that they read it. It's a different spin on it. Maybe it uses a different sense of humor. It has these assessment tools at the end that ping the things that they really don't understand about the particular rule. And that, again, is a little bit of a disease vector to get into their under their skin.
Yeah, and then once it works there, they might come to you and say, okay, this is another issue that our property students don't get.
You're not going to get them wholesale to accept it out of the camp.
We, so my name's Aaron, I'm at the University of Utah. I feel that instructional designers and people that have a background in cognitive science and theories and stuff help out. So that's kind of my role at the University of Utah. And it's not always technology related. To the extent of flipped classrooms, it's help me with a presentation. How can I reach the students better? And I honestly feel that, as was mentioned earlier, asking faculty to do this, not going to happen. Not even close. Not to give too much away in my presentation. We've asked people to write scripts and they say no. But instructional designers, you can't ask faculty and you can't have IT staff do this. This is a hybrid role. This is a specialized role. And I have the trust of a lot of faculty at the University of Utah. Even the curmudgeons that don't want anything to do with it will still come and ask questions. So you have this interesting interface between faculty and content and technology. And instructional designers are all over the place in K through 12. These are people that understand things like metacognition, can help faculty, help instruct them understand, why is this important to me? What itch is this going to scratch? How is this going to help the students? And I, again, for my own kind, I strongly advocate at least taking a look at instructional designers. You might even have a master's program at your university you can go ask. Can we borrow a few of your people or work on a project with us? And I think they're key at getting into that because they can easily get trust. They've got masters and PhDs in these topics. They can get the trust of the faculty and then hopefully work in some of those things, but not overburden the faculty to say, now you have to learn Keynote, now you have to learn, power, what's the video editing software and stuff. Yeah, you know what I mean? That's way too much.
I just want to second your comment about instructional designers. At the University of Florida, we're just finishing up a MOOC for the law school, and we borrowed an instructional designer from our continuing education department on
There you
campus.
go. Awesome.
So between them and our CITT program, where we're actually taping green screen, it's been awesome. He's seen us through everything. We have 8 people that he's kind of been herding. So it really helps, and the law professors have been working with him very well. Everybody loves him.
There you go. Now everybody should have one.
I completely agree, and love the 3 points that you hit: faculty, content, and technology working together. One of the things that we run into occasionally with our faculty who are a tiny bit adventurous, and I do mean really tiny bit. If whatever it is that they're trying to do in the classroom doesn't work perfectly, they're right back to, square one. Oh my God. And so partnering with our IT folks that handle that piece of the technology is really critical to make sure that it does work. Even if it's just the tiniest little video clip that they want to show or something like that, it's got to work, because then you will build. And it is. You guys just hit it perfectly. With the faculty, getting, somebody who's out there that's willing to try it, that's respected by their colleagues, and we'll talk about it. And then the content, the instructional design, absolutely, and the technology piece.
One of the things that I appreciate about what you're pushing here is that I don't think this works as well if every school and every professor is inventing it themselves.
Right.
That there's one of the advantages of all this is there are actually gains of scale, and the gains of scale typically involve some kind of centralized thing. Whether it's a nonprofit model, and Callie has been essentially a leader in this for some time, or your model, or for that matter the commercial publishers. I think we're we're going to see a number of different flowers blooming and some of them withering. But coming together to make it happen at scale rather than each institution reinventing it by itself strikes me as a necessary step.
Yeah, and that's one of the keys to the philosophy of LegalED, that it's a collaborative community effort. Because it's true, we don't need 200 sets of videos on contracts, No,
you only need one, ours.
Or maybe you need like a few, because maybe there are different perspectives. Like, so I teach immigration, and there's a lot of different perspectives right now on immigration. Yet when my students hear from me, they're hearing my perspective. One thing that I think about that would be great is to be able to use video to bring in those other voices. So students are hearing what it's like to be an immigrant lawyer at the southern border. It's different in Philadelphia, right? Or understand what it's like to be in Hazleton and be involved in that litigation, which was actually in Pittsburgh. So, you know what I mean? So that's another benefit here. So I don't think that we necessarily need 100 different videos on a particular rule against perpetuities, but it might be really cool to create a library where students are getting access to a lot of different ideas on a particular case or on a particular legal theory. So that's another added benefit of this.
Just really briefly, because I know I already said something, but just speaking as a technologist also to the technologists in the room, when you give these presentations and you talk to faculty members, listen to what they're saying back to you too. Because I've been able to show off some really whiz-bang tools and techniques to some faculty members, and they've gone, how do you make the arrow on that screenshot? How do you get the screenshot to begin with? You know? And if that's what the level that they're working at, then meet them at that level and say, well, maybe this is what we need to be showing them. And then we can move on to the other things that we want to do. You know, that's not a disappointing interchange. That's an exciting one because they're telling you by asking a question, this is what I want to know. This is what I need to know.
Yeah. I talked to a colleague at the University of Washington Law School who just won a university-wide Teaching Excellence Award. She's an assistant professor and she used to teach K-12 school before she went to law school.
Oh, cool.
And so I was asking her, you know, a lot of concrete questions about what she had been doing. And we started talking about our other colleagues. And so she's been at law school, I think maybe 4 years. And we discovered that she had never observed any of our colleagues teaching. She had actually no idea what anybody else was doing in the classroom. And I know that I've observed colleagues teaching when I need to prepare a memo for a tenure and promotion file. And so one of the things I've been suggesting to my colleagues is that in the annual faculty evaluation process, that the number of colleagues' classes that you've observed would be taken into account, because I think part of the problem is you can't get people to collaborate on technology if they're not collaborating about anything at all related to classroom instruction. So I was surprised that someone who was being recognized at the university generally for being like incredibly engaged and dynamic didn't even think that engagement with her peers at the law school would have any value. So
yeah, no, it is interesting, right? Like, even when there are innovations happening in the classroom, it's like limited to the students in that classroom during that semester. So we have to figure out ways to amplify those voices. So there's this really good TED Talk by Chris Anderson. He's the curator of TED. And it talks about the value of video for performance arts. So he talks about, it starts with this kid somewhere in Asia, like a 10-year-old, doing all this street dancing in his living room, and he videotaped it and put it on YouTube. And so what Chris Anderson said is that YouTube is actually facilitating an advancement in the performance arts because people don't have to travel to see performances anymore. So in the past, if you wanted to see what was cool in juggling, you had to like find a juggler at a corner and watch him and see what the new techniques were. Now people, street dancers, jugglers, I think law professors were performance artists as well. If we start videotaping our stuff and putting them online, people could see in the classroom, right? They could see how people teach in different ways. And so that's one of the reasons that's one of the motivations for this Igniting Law Teaching Conference, to start like amplifying those voices.
Two things. One, law faculty hate to have themselves videotaped. They're terrified of this for many reasons. They think it's going to go on YouTube. And they're going to wind up on YouTube, and then someone's going to make fun of them, and then everything will be over, or whatever. There are things we've had to do to work around it. I'm Debbie Gansberg. I'm from Chicago, Kent, by the way. And I'm seeing, going back to your first point, where you're saying there's competencies that law students need to know. And I'm seeing an opportunity, as we're discussing the different techniques and technologies that we're teaching our faculty, I'm finding new opportunities to bring these same skills to our students. So you mentioned, hey, what's driving you nuts in the property class? Well, we're now asking our legal writing faculty, what's driving you nuts in legal writing? Our students can't properly format Word. We're going back to that Kia audit where we're realizing we are graduating students collectively that don't have some basic tech skills. Okay, so let's come in. There are some videos out there, but maybe we have to do a little hands-on, 10 minutes. This is what they need to know in Word. And also, of course, at the same time, all right, we've taught this to our faculty, taught this to our students. We also want to make sure our staff at the law school have some of these same skills as well, so we're reaching out to them and making sure. So as we develop these techniques for teaching the faculty and their special needs, we're realizing we can transfer the same knowledge throughout the law school, hopefully building a bigger base that then says, oh wait, if my assistant can do this, I can do this. If my students can do this, I can do this, and it will propagate throughout. We'll see if this works.
Yeah, that sounds like a great model. Is there another comment? So I was surprised. So I was at the Immigration Law Professors Conference a month ago in California, UC Irvine, and a group of law professors who had done some videos that are on LegalED using that Video Scribe program talked about their experience. And there was there were a few people who came up to us afterward and said, can you teach us? So these are all law professors. So they came up to us afterward and asked us if we could teach them how to use Video Scribe. So Steve Manning from Lewis and Clark, who had created the videos, and Juliet Stump, they're both teaching there. And last week, we hosted a webinar, a free webinar, on how to use Video Scribe. And we thought it would be like 5 law professors, like the 5 who had contacted us at the Immigration Law Professors Conference. But we did, send it out more broadly just in case other people wanted to participate. So it turned out that 57 people participated, like 57 law professors participated in this conference, in this webinar. And so it's possible that there are law professors out there who want to learn this stuff and just need the resources. And maybe it's 1 or 2 at a particular school, but it kind of goes back to Jill's point that if you can find that person or those 2 people and figure out how to get them the training, then they'll start talking about it at faculty meetings or in the lunchroom or wherever, and hopefully the word will start spreading.
Is it Video Scribe webinar recorded in LegalED?
Yes, it is. Yeah. And I think it's already posted. I have help from a legal assistant who's been doing that for me. But it was just last week, I guess. So I see we have 2 minutes left. Any other people with comments? Oh, Leah is here too. Leah Plunkett is another person who was at the United Law Teaching Conference. Oh, 2 people back there at the United Law Teaching Conference, John. And so there's a lot in this community, so look for the announcement, which will come out probably in the fall, maybe, about the timing and stuff for the spring, and maybe you guys can be at make videos in next year's conference. Thanks.
If I could add the whole TEDx piece, for most every presenter, it was their very first performance. And many, many people wrote notes to us saying how glad, we made people stretch when I thought maybe they were just going to drop out. But so think about even the TEDx format for different things, because 8 minutes of great content is a whole lot better than an hour of talking heads on a panel.
Yeah, so one other thing that I'm working on, I was just invited a few weeks ago to LegalED, and I gave a talk to the staff. Pablo was in the room, and Judy Areen, who's the new executive director, was in the room. And I talked to them about why I think LegalED needs to think about using more technology in the conferences. And so it's possible that we're going to be able to do a TEDx-style conference as one of the LegalED conferences in the next few years. So Pablo and I are going to work on that. And I also I was invited by LegalED to be on the planning committee for the clinical conference, which is going to be in the spring. And there again, one of my things to agree to be on the conference is I wanted something to be about technology, and I also wanted us to try to videotape some of the presentation so that we use a TEDx-style format. So hopefully we'll start, getting professors to kind of realize the value of this. And I think if we get a TEDx license, that might be a motivator for law professors to start thinking about using this, because I just saw a post by Dan Gilbert yesterday who did a TED Talk, and he said in the first month, 1 million people viewed it. I mean, that's Dan Gilbert, but you know, it's a really big platform. And if we can use that as a platform to start getting law professors focused and interested on, you know, doing this new way of presenting, that might be another avenue for another entry point. So thank you so much Please feel free to contact me or join LegalED. We'd love to have you.